Good afternoon, everybody. I want to welcome you all to the Rules Committee. For the record, my name is Steve Shurtleff, and I'm a state rep from Concord. Speaker Norelli would normally chair this committee, but unfortunately she had a scheduling conflict, and as the second named member of the committee, I have the honor of being the chair of the Rules Committee today. I should explain, I know there are many of you in this room who have testified at other committee hearings. Rules Committee is unique insofar as that we welcome the public here. That's why we have the public meeting. But the discussion today is between the members of the House. As you probably know, each body adopts the rule by which they will operate over the next session. And that is the role of this committee today to make recommendations to the full House, which will be voted on in our session on January 2nd. So although we welcome you here and we're glad that you're here, the conversation will be between the members of the committee. Just so that you know what we're going to do, and for the other members of this committee, we're going to start with the deadlines, which is very important. I'm going to ask Representative Richardson to explain the deadlines, and I'm very glad that we have our clerk, Terrie Norelli, here with us today. We're going to discuss that. Then we're going to start the whole document of the current rules, and Representative Richardson will discuss the changes. The members of this committee will discuss those changes, and then I'll ask if there's a motion whether to adopt that recommended change. So if any member of the committee has a question, I'd be glad to answer it if I can. If there isn't, yes.
I understand what you just said about this being a public hearing. It is relative just to how we run our house.
Right.
However, it is a public hearing, and the public does come to be heard.
Yeah, it's my understanding of past practices, and it's always been that this has been for the members of this committee only. But I appreciate your input. Yes.
Isn't this a public meeting, not a public hearing?
Correct.
That's why they're allowed.
Exactly. Are there any other questions? Seeing none, I'll ask Representative Richardson. I believe he's going to be starting on page 25 of the proposed rules.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And we are going to be talking about Rule 65, but you should have, the committee members should have in front of them a House deadline comparison sheet. And in the left-hand column under 2013 and then 1913 are the proposed dates for House action for the upcoming session, and I'd like to, with the chair's permission, ask the clerk to explain the deadlines and make a recommendation to us.
Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You'll note that this is a comparison of the first year of the biennium deadlines since 2001. So we're only comparing apples and apples. We're comparing budget year deadlines. And if you look at what we have as action, those are the things that you're used to seeing in your deadlines in the calendar and in the rules. The major difference here is when you get, oh, sorry, there's an extra little letter L there. When you get down to crossover, you'll see crossover on House bills and crossover on budgets, which of course are also House bills. The original intent was to try to go with the April date of 4/4. I believe there has been some negotiating with the Senate, and as a result of that, there is a tentative agreement, if both bodies adopt these, to have all the other bills cross on March 28th, leaving only the budgets to cross on April 4th. So that's why you see two crossover dates. Continuing along, this again matches up with what the other chamber has planned as far as the Committee of Conference deadlines. Amazingly, we had our recommendation ready and I went over to talk to the Senate clerk, and they had the same dates, and we had not spoken about it at all up to that point. There is a change in the deadline from what we currently have. If you remember back in June, we adopted deadlines for filing bills this fall and for the introduction of bills. In those current deadlines, the last day to amend rules by majority vote was sometime in the middle of February. Prior to that, the last day to amend rules and the last day to introduce had been the same date. And it was earlier, much earlier than the middle of February. So this proposal has that now coinciding with the last day to introduce, which if you are looking at a calendar, you're going to see it's a Friday, but you all know we introduce in recess, so that's why that date is there on a Friday. Are there any questions about these dates? You also have a calendar. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see it.
When we say crossover budgets, we're talking HB1 and HB2?
1, 2, and 25.
1, 2, and 25. Okay, thank you.
You also have a calendar for those of you that prefer more visual presentation, and a separate page showing what happens when we have the 2 crossover dates, what happens to the month of March. That information unfortunately came after I'd put these together, so sorry you end up with extra pages. But we have one thing that's called draft, which is every month from now to June except March. Then you have the March page, which is option with 2 crossover dates. And then you have the deadline comparison since 2001.
Any questions of the clerk?
Okay.
Is there any discussion or comments by any members of the? Seeing that, I'd ask it to be a motion to be a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'd make a motion to recommend to the House that we adopt the deadlines as set forth in this sheet that we've been presented with for the upcoming session.
Second.
By a show of hands, the motion is to adopt these dates. Is there any comment or discussion on the motion? Seeing those, all those who are in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Opposed? May the record show that the motion carried unanimously.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'll now go through the proposed changes to House rules, and you should have, all of the committee members should have in front of them a document that is dated December 19, 2012, showing 2012-2013 rules. And there were some distributed to the audience. I apologize. I didn't know we'd have this many people here, so if you want to look on, if you're interested in this, I hope you can share, and I apologize for not having more copies. Just for the benefit of the members of the committee, the typing that is in blue is information that's been added, or phrasing that has been added. Anything that's in red has been stricken. And Mr. Chairman, if you would like, I can go through the changes one by one and try to explain why they're made and what the impact is.
Right, what we'll do is if you could go through them one by one, we'll discuss them. I'll ask for a motion for that section of the change. And then based on that, what happens to that motion, then we'll move on to the next section.
Okay. Thank you. The first change appears on page number 3. And it is paragraph 18 related to petitions. And the existing rule is in the black print. And as you'll see, under existing rules, it says that the speaker shall state the substance of the petition in summary form, and a copy shall be placed on file with the House Clerk. It's been changed to say that the Clerk of the House shall state the substance of the petition. The reason for this change is that it's my understanding that the past practice has been, in fact, for the clerk to state the substance of the petition, and so we really are just conforming the rules to the existing practice. If there's any questions on that?
Any questions? Representative Jasper.
I do. I think that it certainly, at the very least, is confusing when you look at Rule 4, which states the Speaker shall refer all bills, resolutions, memorials, accounts, and petitions and other matters to the appropriate committee unless otherwise ordered by the House. And then it speaks of petitions again, but now it's just talking about placing them on file. So how is anyone really supposed to know what's going to happen to a petition the way the rules are at the present time? And by the way, I'm not meaning to cast any aspersions because I think that confusion probably existed in the past as well. But I don't think it makes for terribly good policy, whether it was like that in the past or not. And I would wonder why it wouldn't say here and refer to the appropriate committee unless otherwise ordered by the House to be consistent.
Well, if I may, you are right. This existed under existing rules. What is contemplated here is that the Speaker would make a decision as is authorized under Rule 4 to determine what will happen with a petition, whether it would be referred to a committee or not. If it's one that is not going to be referred to a committee, it would simply be read. The clerk of the House would state the substance of the petition summary form and place it on file.
If I may, as a follow-up to that.
Certainly.
But the language in 4 says shall refer unless otherwise ordered by the House. So it would seem appropriate that the intent would be that it shall go to a policy committee unless there is action taken by the House not to send it there. Again, notwithstanding what has happened in the past, certainly we had changed in the last session how things were, and now I think this creates greater confusion going forward if we have verbiage here that says shall unless, and then the confusion in Rule 18. So I really think we ought to work to clarify this so everyone is very clear on exactly what the process is. As I say, I think that it should go to a policy committee unless otherwise ordered, and that's why I suggested the language in 18 just to be consistent.
I think we could address that if that's the decision of the committee. I think we could clarify that. I don't think there's a problem with that, but it's up to.
I think the clerk may have some input to this, if you would.
Madam Clerk.
I just wanted to say that what happens now, regardless of where a petition is sent, a copy is placed on file with the clerk and has been for years and years and years. We maintain a full file. The summary, the substance of the petition is drafted by me so that it is not, there's nothing political about it. It's just a straight comment, a sentence about what this petition is about, and we have them on file. Where they go after that is of no particular concern to me or my office. It's a repository. Other bills and petitions are filed in various places. We have them, and some of them are in OLS and various other places. The petition file has always been in the office of the clerk.
I appreciate that, and that's helpful. Follow up, if I may, certainly. Then at least at the moment, given the specific language of 4 and what our immediate past practice has been, could we agree that the plain reading of Rule 4 would be that the Speaker would refer to a policy committee unless there was a motion made simply to take no further action or put it on file? And that if there was a wish to change that, then that would need to be a further rule change, because it seems very clear what the plain reading is at this present.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Following up on Representative Richardson said about working it out, I think we need to do something, because clearly these two rules are at odds with each other. And to adopt this one puts the Speaker in jeopardy of violating the rules without even trying, almost. And I think from our side, we're not opposing getting something done here, but we need to have different language that puts 4 and 18 together, I guess, somehow, that's all. So I don't know whether you want to try to do that now, or bring it up the first in January and get something done in between, or what you want to do.
Let me ask one question, and if the answer is no, then maybe we should do it January 2nd. But we could just strike the word petitions from Rule 4. And so it would say that the speaker shall refer bills, resolutions, memorials, accounts, and other matters coming before the House to the appropriate committee. Would that solve the problem?
Is that, would that get that work together? You hear what he said? He suggested striking petitions from 4 and just throwing it in the other.
Well, certainly mechanically that works on 4. It still leaves, you know, then what do we do with petitions if someone does want it placed on file? And if I may, I would like to see, at very least, because anyone, ultimately, a petition can be drafted as a piece of legislation. And so if it stated that the petition would be received and the summary be printed along with the title, be printed in the calendar so that all representatives would know that they were there, I think that would give the opportunity for someone certainly to come to rules to ask for a late introduction of the bill or to file it the next year. The problem is the way we do it now. If you happen to miss that reading in the House, you're not even going to know it was there unless it's in the calendar. So I personally would be okay with it printed in the calendar.
Representative Weber. I'm sorry. Representative Weber. Oh, Representative Chair, would you?
No, go ahead, no, that's fine, go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say, they are printed in the journal once, but am I understanding that what you are suggesting is to say on Rule 18 that the clerk of the House shall state the substance of the petition in summary. A copy shall be placed on file with the House clerk and
printed in the House calendar.
Madam Clerk, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
That's what I'm looking for, because
could I have
I think the clerk had a comment to make about that. Madam Clerk?
The calendar is prospective, it's what's coming up, it's not what's already been done. And if you do it the way you're projecting or suggesting here, the copy shall be placed on file and that shall be noted in the calendar, that's not journaling it.
What noted the journal? Wouldn't noting it in the journal?
Which is
solve
already
the
done.
I understand that, but I think probably realistically, very few of us actually read the journal. And what I was suggesting is, obviously, if you hold on to a petition for 2 weeks so that it can be noticed in the calendar, that's not a problem. It would be like any other bill that we are dealing with. When you receive it, maybe the language doesn't work that way, I don't know, but simply that it would be an item that would show that it has been received and it has been received and we will be receiving it that day. I think that lets everyone know that there is a petition out there. It lets the public know that it's there, and it lets us know it's coming up. I don't see what the problem would be with doing that, because it would be prospective, just like any bill.
Madam Clerk?
I think I have a solution, because I understand what you're saying.
Normally do.
How about if in the second sentence it says the clerk of the House shall state the substance of the petition in summary, print same in the calendar, and a copy then. If we do after printing in the calendar, you want it noted in the calendar before it's done? You want it before it's read?
Correct.
Before any petition is received and read, the substance of the petition shall be in concise form, printed in the calendar, and the name of the members presenting it shall be recorded on the petition, and then go on to say it's read.
Yes,
Is that fine? Representative Jasper?
I believe so, I think it is.
If the
Probably make that as an amendment.
I would make that as an amendment to amend section 18 of the House Rules.
Is there a second?
Second.
Further comment?
Well, my question is, you're still in conflict with 4. So
Yeah,
you
well,
want
that
to
would be
vote
my
the
next
same-
motion if this passes.
If you do both at the same time,
I'd be glad to also amend Rule 4 at the same time and
strike petitions,
strike petitions, the reference to petitions in Rule
short
4.
the process out.
Second.
You've amended your original motion, Representative Jasper, to
I
include
have.
section 4. Okay, so there's a second on that. Any discussion?
What's that amendment on 4?
You're deleting the word petitions on number 4, and then adding Karen's language on
Printed in the calendar.
printed in the
As the
calendar
second
on
phrase.
18. So the two would coincide.
Any further comments or questions before the vote is taken? The motion is on that section that we have just read as amended by Representative Jaspers. I was just going to ask for a vote, but if you have a comment,
I do.
Representative Tucker.
I understand
am
that,
on.
thank you, Mr. Chair. I understand that if there is a conflict here, but I do take issue with removing petitions because I think at some point, if there is an opportunity for them to be referred to committee, I don't know how that will happen.
Thank you. Any other comments before the vote? Seeing none, the motion is before us to amend that by the Representative Jasper's amendment. Those in favor of that section being approved as amended, please raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Those opposed? May the record reflect that that section as amended, vote was 9 to 1, and the motion carries.
And when you say that section, we're really talking about what section?
4 and 18.
4 and 18, I should say sections, and I thank the clerk for her input. Next
Okay,
section.
now we get to the easy ones.
Yeah,
Okay.
here's the difference.
Page
One
4.
more. Yeah.
This relates to constitutional amendments, concurrent resolutions. And you may recall that sometime in the last session, we had a situation where a constitutional amendment failed to get the necessary 3/5 majority, but got more than a majority. And as a result, we couldn't do anything with it because we couldn't get the necessary votes to pass it. We couldn't get the necessary votes to table it because it required a supermajority. So this would change the rules with respect to a motion to lay on the table of a constitutional amendment, and it would require simply a majority vote. So we can, if we fail to pass a constitutional amendment by the 3/5 majority, it then could be tabled and we could dispose of it in that way.
Any comments? Any phone calls?
Whose phone is that?
Coming from that to the table.
He said it's okay.
Go ahead with that one. Okay, thank you, Representative Shurtleff, for that input.
Let me call you to make sure your phone is on.
Are you sure?
Doesn't seem to be working. Oh. I don't understand.
If you were in commerce,
That's
it would
usually
cost you
like
$5.
Seeing no comments, is there a motion to tentatively adopt that section?
I would move adoption of the second.
Representative Weber moves adoption, Representative Goley second. All those in favor of the motion of that section, please raise your hand. Aye. Those opposed? May the record reflect the vote with 10 to nothing.
I
Yes.
fully will expect to pay any fine. It's appropriate, so just let me know.
Put a fine in the rule.
Representative Chandler, just having you here, it's priceless, so
Fine enough.
we'll call it even. The next section, Representative.
Okay, thank you. If you'll turn to page 6, as you all are aware, the proposal is to remove 2 two committees that were formed for the first time 2 years ago. And on page 6, the proposal is to delete the Constitutional Review and Statutory Codification Committee. And if you'll turn to the next page 7 to remove or to delete the Redress of Grievances Committee. And just so while we're all talking about that subject, that involves also deleting the duties of those two committees, which appear in paragraph C on page 7 and paragraph Q on page 10. So the proposal is to delete the Constitutional Review and Statutory Recodification Committee and the Redress of Grievance Committee, and of course that involves deleting their duties.
Representative Chandler.
Thank you. Just briefly, I'll let you know what our concern on this is, and why we will be not be able to support this. We understand that perhaps these committees may have had undertaken too many things last year. I don't know if that's the best way to describe that or not. Our concern is by just doing away with them, then there's no avenue to deal with these, because we haven't seen any options. I know I had spoken to the speaker earlier about maybe a couple of options on things of how we could deal with some of these issues. So I think that's our concern. We now have gone from one place back to 0. And I was hopeful there'd be somewhere, I don't know if it'd be in the middle, but at least somewhere upwards of 0 to be able to deal with these issues should they come up and were dealt with the speaker and or others the House felt were appropriate to have dealt with in a manner other than just printing. That's all. So,
Representative Tucker.
To second Representative Chandler's thoughts, I'll speak directly to Constitutional Review at this point. And if we remove this committee, which certainly it did have its place, and I think it took the place of us as a general court thinking that we needed to refer bills over to judiciary to see if they were constitutional or not. This committee did serve a purpose for us. Would there be an opportunity to put a special committee in place should the opportunity arise that we need to look at the constitutionality of a bill?
If I could yield to that, Mr. Chairman, I think the Speaker already has the authority to appoint special committees as needed, so I think there is an avenue. And as a former member of that committee, I really think that there are other ways to deal with constitutional review other than that committee, and perhaps better ways to deal with that.
Representative Chandler.
and we may not necessarily disagree with that, but we haven't had any option presented where it might be dealt with differently. I guess that's what we're saying.
Well, I don't know if it does any good to debate it, but
No.
I think the Judiciary Committee has a number of lawyers on the committee, and they certainly deal with constitutional issues, and I think that's a better way. And in those rare cases where the Judiciary Committee doesn't feel it can handle it, there's House counsel and there's other ways to get legal advice that perhaps are a better way to do it than a committee that quite frankly did not have a lot of legal training and didn't really do a lot of in-depth analysis of constitutional law.
Any other comments? Is there a motion regarding this section of the proposed rules?
I want to state the sections. It would be
It's-
redress grievances in section C and then section Q.
And the reference to, redress grievances, constitutional review, and the two paragraphs C and Q that deal with their duties.
Correct. Is there a second to that motion?
I'm sorry.
Any comment before the vote's taken?
Oh, is this also on redress as well?
Both of them combined, yeah.
Yes, I definitely have comments regarding redress. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome.
Section 1, Article 31 of our Constitution states that the legislature shall assemble for redress of public grievances. And when you look at that, they do have to have a type of recourse. And redress is for those who do not have the financial wherewithal to go back to court and fight again. This is an opportunity for their concerns of how government may have offended them and get some type of redress. If it means that we have to change the laws, which in fact, that maybe this committee did find cases where we did in fact had to fix some of our laws. This is a committee that would help us find those problems. And when you think about redress, where will the recourse going to be if we take away this constitutional right from them?
Yeah. Thank you, Chief Lady. Representative Weber.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Actually, nice to get an applause. For you said anything.
In answer to that, I would say that one of the things we found during the last 2 years, and one of the things that was acknowledged in one of the last meetings of the Rules Committee, on which I sat as a substitute, is that when we talk about the redress of grievances, we acknowledged, all of us, that we as a legislature do not have the power to redo individual grievances against court decisions or agency decisions. What the purpose of redress of grievances has come to mean over the years is that corrective actions need to be taken when we find that there is a law or an agency action or something that is not working properly, and that the place to submit the fix is to the policy committee that has governance over that particular policy area. To do otherwise seems to me to be bad policy, but on an individual level, unspeakably cruel to people who come to the legislature thinking that their individual problem is going to be overturned or overridden by this legislature, and who then find that that's not what's going to happen.
Further comments, Representative Tucker.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And Representative Robert, you're very correct in the fact that the purpose is to find out where the problems are. If we in fact remove redress of grievances, how are we going to find out where those problems are to take the corrective action?
Representative Weber.
I find out what the problems are by listening to my constituents and deciding whether a bill is needed, and there are 400 of us to listen to our constituents, and you only have to persuade one of them to file a bill.
Any further comments? Representative Tucker and Representative Jasper afterward.
Thank you very much. I think one of the biggest advantages that we saw with redress of grievances was that we saw in certain cases that there was a continual problem, and that only would have came about with the institution of redress of grievances. Because one case with one over here, and then another case over here, and another case over here, they were all individual. However, when you put them all together, we saw that there was a bigger problem. And that way it can be addressed, and it's not just an individual piece of legislation affecting one. It's one that we see as bigger and affecting all.
Representative Jasper.
I'm not going to repeat Representative Tucker's comments. I will agree with her for the most part, and not taking exceptions to what she said. Mine is more a technical comment. As I read this, and maybe I'm being overly technical, but as I look at the proposed rules and heard the motion, it would appear that our rules would then be numbered or lettered in this case, so the Q would be blank and R would continue, and I would suspect the intent would be to renumber all after P. If we could just agree, then I don't think a motion is necessary.
Well, that's a good point.
That is the intent, Representative Jasper. Thank you.
Thank you for pointing that out. Any further comments? Seeing none, those in favor of the motion as pending will raise a hand. Those opposed? May the record reflect that the motion passes on a vote of 6-1.
All right, Mr. Chairman, thank you. The next change is on page 9, and under existing rules, the rules call for the Legislative Administration Committee to have 3 subcommittees. having to do with elections, mileage, and enrolled bills. And it's my understanding that those subcommittees have not been formed in a number of years. And so really this is, I think, a housekeeping matter where we're simply eliminating them as official categories or subcommittees. If it's necessary to create these subcommittees again, they can be created. I mean, there is leeway in the rule to allow that to happen, but it's a housekeeping matter. We just didn't think it made any sense to have these subcommittees that in fact weren't being appointed and weren't meeting.
Any comments? Representative Jasper.
So my assumption is, given the duties within the Committee on Legislative Administration, if during the process there were problems found in enrollment, the report would just simply come back to the legislature from the Committee on Legislative Administration, much as we maybe pretend to do it now if something's false and found in the process. Is that?
Yes, that's correct.
Representative Weber and Representative Eaton.
Yeah, as a past chair of legislative administration, it was several people had that particular task to do work, and they got together, it got done. If we had a problem on mileage, it was often resolved by a committee member speaking quietly to somebody and the problem was fixed. Obviously, if there is, and the election problem that came up was decided by the committee as a whole. So I think the committee chair has the authority to appoint whatever subcommittees are necessary, and the committee retains the overall responsibility for reporting to the House on all three.
Thank you.
I go back a little farther when legislative administration was a secondary committee and you were assigned to, as a secondary committee, as the one to go through the third part, and I recall on the third part of the enrolled bills that it was a combination of the Secretary of State's office and legislative services to re-review the bill and go over it, and we would read it, but it was nothing formal and signed off.
Any further comments? Seeing none, is there a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
The motion is pending. All those in favor of the motion, please raise their right hand. Now it's official. Opposed, seeing none, the motion, let the record reflect that the motion carried 10 to nothing.
All right, the next change, Mr. Chairman, is on page 22. And the only change here is that we've added a provision with respect to unanimous consent and a reference to Mason's rules that deal with unanimous consent, and we've added the reference to Mason's rules with respect to personal privilege. And there's always been some confusion as to what's unanimous consent and what's personal privilege, and it just was thought to be helpful to have a reference to the section in Mason's where these are talked about. So that's, I think, a housekeeping issue.
Representative Jasper.
I'm wondering, and probably the clerk would be the most appropriate person to answer that. Would it be possible just to get an overview of what these sections of Mason state?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. 220 talks about what's a question of privilege, what's a privilege of the House, and what is personal privilege and what is not personal privilege. And it's very specific, and you've heard me say it over and over again. That one, I think, is very, very good. The unanimous consent on section 537. I had a bookmark for it. Thought that question might come up. The unanimous consent section in Mason's basically is talking about what we often use as without objection. And I think, if I'm understanding this, and I'm sorry, Representative Richardson, I probably should have talked with you about this before. The closest thing I see is just when there appears to be no opposition and that you can't take it away afterwards. You want pages 374, 375, Representative Jasper, if you've got that.
Yes.
book, but I think most of the unanimous consent section talks about what we use as without objection. We're gonna do this, because it talks about the body taking action by unanimous consent. When we use unanimous consent on the floor, we mean a member is requesting the unanimous consent of the House to speak on some topic or other. I know Congress uses that, and I don't know what their differential definition might be. I think this is as good as any.
Representative Richardson.
Thank you. Representative Jasper, I think that you might want to look at, on page 374, paragraph 1, talks about a request for unanimous consent and simply says that the request should be stated precisely and clearly without objection. So I think the reference there would be, we just give some warning to the House as to what the subject matter of the unanimous consent is. As you know, sometimes somebody will stand up and invoke unanimous consent, and the House has absolutely no idea what the member's going to be talking about.
Any further comments? Representative Jasper.
Yes, I think this is somewhat confusing because it does talk about suspension of the rules, which is not the way we have meant it. Not sure that this clarifies anything for us, and perhaps this part of it really is confusing. I suppose it still does leave a question of personal privilege for someone, but certainly when I read this whole section, it raises more questions than it answers. I'm not prepared to vote for this at this particular time, so we'll have to vote against it until I can look at this along with personal privilege.
If I may. Representative Jasper, I don't think it means we need to suspend rules. It simply, the section says that this has the same effect as suspending rules, but basically a member would ask for unanimous consent to talk about whatever it is they want to talk about, and then if there's no objection, the member would be allowed to talk about it.
Any further comments? Is there a motion on this section?
Second.
Any comments on the motion? Seeing none, those in favor, please raise their right hand. Those opposed? May the record reflect the motion carries on a vote of 6-4. Representative Terrie.
May I make a question? I just have a question on a previous rule before we take it down. It's on page 19, number 46.
Yeah.
The last statement of this says chairman may decline bill referral, and this, of course, has been in the rules for quite some time. And I just want clarification as to which chair, and perhaps the clerk can answer that question. Is it the first chair can decline or the second chair?
Where are you, in which section?
Page 46, the very first bills appropriating.
Mm-hmm.
The very last piece of that is chairman may decline bill referral. And my question is what has been the process of who is the chair that would decline? Would that be the first chair or the second committee chair?
Page 20, I think.
19.
Yeah, which section is it?
No, it's right at the top.
Representative Chandler, if you get an
yes.
explanation.
I mean, traditionally,
I
obviously,
can't
most
find
second,
it.
most committees,
It's in the title of the.
most second committee referrals are the finance, that's all ways and means. But some other committees do give them. But it's like if any standing committee, if the speaker rules a bill that goes to finance, the committee chairman can go to the chairman of finance and try to talk about taking it, I guess, to be basic, and just say, look, here's what the bill does. And many times the chairman of finance would agree, yeah, we don't need to see this, and that can happen, and which is why that's.
So it would be the second chair.
Yes, that's intended to be the second committee of referral. Good.
Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry, Representative Tucker, I couldn't find that because I wasn't looking at the title. We never used to put the titles. Last session, titles came on each of the rules, but prior to that, I was not used to seeing that on the page, and I'm still not used to seeing that. I was looking for a section of the rule. because that's not really the rule, that's the title.
Question answered.
Thank you.
Representative Weber.
And if you read the rule, section F said, the chairman of committees receiving a bill or referral as outlined in this rule with the approval of the speaker, may decline the referral of any bill from another committee, or notwithstanding, it goes on about waiving public hearings.
Thank you. That's what I was looking for.
Sir, does that answer your question? And I thank you, gentlemen, for the response to that question. The next section.
Thank you. The next change is on page 24, having to do with weapons. And just, I'm sure that the members of the committee are aware of this, but this section relates only to the House chamber, the anterooms, the cloak rooms, or any portion of the State House adjacent to any of the above. It does not apply to the legislative office building or other areas of the premises that are under the control of the Senate jointly with the House. So this relates to the House chamber, anterooms, cloak rooms, and any portion of the State House adjacent there too. This change would revert to the rule that was in effect from, I believe, the 1980s until, well, Representative Eaton corrects me, he says the 1960s, but it's been in effect for many, many years until 2 years ago when the rule was changed to allow the display of deadly, that prevented the display of weapons, but allowed them to be carried. And this would revert to saying that no person other than law enforcement shall carry or have in their possession a deadly weapon in any of the areas where I've just talked about. And it deletes a phrase that was added, I believe, 2 years ago, saying that a person is allowed to exercise self-defense and defense of others, saying the rule would not preclude that. So the change is to revert back to what we had from either the 1960s or 1980s until 2 years ago.
Any comments, Representative Chandler?
Thank you. I have two issues for this. The first being somewhat, I guess you'd call it a philosophical issue, which I will address first, and secondly, just some factual problems with it. And I said, philosophically, the problem I have with this, and I mean, obviously this is a terrible time to talk about guns from any side. I understand that in the light of what's happening, so I wish we didn't even have to have this discussion now, but we're here. So the fact of the matter is, by adopting this rule as proposed, without security measures in the State House, which I don't think any of us have ever supported and probably won't for some period of time, without security measures, what we're doing is saying we as members will basically allow members of the public to come in, of which we will have no way of knowing that they have a firearm, but we under more scrutiny for not being able to have a firearm and protect ourselves. And that's just a concern I have, and protect others that might be in the State House. I think this doesn't stop any problem, and it might even create more problems, in my opinion. But the problem is, I think it's just, in my opinion, a knee-jerk reaction to issues as they've happened and were perceived to have happened. So, having said that, then I also have just a couple things in line. Well, the lines aren't numbered, but and I realize these were part of the previous rule, and I had the problem with that too. But any portion of the State House where it mentions adjacent to above, I have no idea. Are you going to, and I don't mean this to be facetious, but are we going to paint a line outside? What? Because you're subjecting people to arrest, which I'll get to in a minute. But when we say adjacent, what is that? I mean, everyone has a different interpretation of what could be adjacent. I don't know. The other thing is, when we are subject to disciplinary action or arrest, do you have a few?
I'll let you finish
that's
first.
fine.
And
then, no, but I'm willing to, hear
okay, if you have no
feedback on
objection,
that
I'll
one right
represent.
there. That's okay.
Was Representative Weber? I didn't see the hand.
Because if I'm wrong.
Go Representative Weber.
I believe it says subject to ejection, not arrest.
Well,
What does it say?
the sentence before says
Disciplinary action.
adjacent, and
Okay.
it refers to adjacent,
Thank you.
which I think is ambiguous, and then the next line is subject to arrest. Under what?
Okay.
Is there a statute that is mentioned? I don't know is there a penalty? What's the penalty? I don't know. That's something that needs to be touched on. And then, to the last sentence, last sentence on the page, or that any person is precluded or legally permitted exercise of self-defense or defense of others. Doesn't mention anything about firearms or guns or anything else in there, so I interpret that to mean that even if someone attacks me, I can't even defend myself with my fist, not that I'd be able to very well, but, or if I see someone attacking someone else, I can't go to their defense without any weapon or anything, and I'm not sure that's what we are intending, but it seems like that's what we have intended. So those are my concerns.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to say a couple things. First of all, just so it's clear, this revision was not a reflection of anything that happened just recently in the news. This has been underway for some period of time, so I just don't want anybody to think it's a knee-jerk reaction to that. And we all of us have very strong feelings about that tragedy and how horrible it was. And so I just want to clear that had nothing to do with this language. What has been proposed here is exactly what was in effect until 2 years ago, and it was intentionally done that way because we just wanted to say, look, we're just going to go back to what it was. I will say personally, and I know many people here and in this room have strong feelings about this. I'm a gun owner. We have a permit to carry, but I do not believe that it is appropriate for people to be in a gallery with weapons and fourth grade students. And I think the appropriate thing for us to do today is, I believe, to go back to what the rule has been for the last 20 years. And then if there's further refinements that need to be made, that's fine. And the representative from Bartlett makes some good points, and those can be looked at. But I think for purposes of right now and getting us off on the right foot, starting a new session, we should go back to the rules that we lived with for many years successfully.
Representative, what the amendment to Rule 63 is taking us back to where we had operated for the last 50 some odd years. It is referred to as the Marshall-Cobley rule when someone in the chamber had threatened to shoot Speaker of the House Cobley, who was unsure what to do. We did not have protective services. We did not have state police in the building as we do now. The only thing we had was the governor's driver, who was a trooper, who did come over to the House chamber. Fortunately, nothing happened that evening. The question was, how do they resolve that at that time? And they came up with Rule 63. The key, according to Marshall Cobley, who has written about it in his book and who I happened to regale in a bar one evening 2 or 3 times maybe, to get the story, is that no member may be searched. The only way that they could get at the banned place was to search. As to Representative Chandler's objections on the last section on self-defense, that's deleting those words, which are almost redundant, because that would be covered by the New Hampshire Criminal Code. You always have a right to defend yourself or a third person.
Further comments?
Jasper. I won't recover the points that Representative Chandler said. I do agree with him. But I will add some thoughts. While I'll tell you, I'm no fan of the idea of weapons in the chamber or the gallery, the reality is we have no way of stopping that from happening. And one of my concerns with all of these type of rules, laws, or anything, is you only then keep people who probably have no criminal intent to begin with from carrying weapons in, and essentially leave the weapons to those who don't care about the rules or the law. And that should be a great concern to all of us. I think it's a well-known fact that people who do commit these type of crimes, their first preference is to commit the crime where they can have good assurance that there will be no one there to take them out. That they go into schools, they go into these places with a fair amount of certainty that they are going to be able to do what they want to do. It will take a certain amount of time for people to get there who have the guns, will be able to take them out, so they're able to inflict the maximum amount of damage to their intended targets. And that is the sad reality of the situation. And that's why I really think that it is important for us to leave the rule as it is. In terms of defining adjacent to, I would certainly say that the hallways and the stairwells are adjacent to, particularly in the gallery. Essentially what we have done. And I agree, these rules were in place, but let's face it, if we could pass a law and never have to revisit it, the legislature would not be in session very often.
Busy clock.
That may not be a bad thing.
This one.
That may not be a bad thing, but that's the reality. So to say that, well, that's the way it was for 50 years doesn't necessarily carry a lot of weight in my mind. We have to deal with the changing reality. So that really puts the whole second floor, every bit of the second floor, off limits to guns, because you can't get off the elevator without being adjacent to the house. You can't, on either end, come up the stairs. You can get on the elevators and go to the third floor, but that would, then what is adjacent there? I mean, is the hallway adjacent? There's no division from the hallway. It's a hallway all the way around. Doesn't that, in effect, then make actually the 2 floors of the building off limit to guns by the house rules? And that's not our authority, but that's the practical effect of doing that. And I certainly agree that we ought to have the ability to defend ourselves again and not wait for somebody to come, or if someone else in the house who is not able to defend themselves is being attacked, we should be able to do that. I'm sure most of us would, but then we're going to be in violation of the rule. This just doesn't make any sense. I don't think it made any sense 40 or 50 years ago, and we shouldn't just continue on by saying, well, that's what we always did.
Representative Tucker, your comment.
Yes, I did. Thank you very much,
You're welcome.
Mr. Chair. I appreciate it. First off, I don't believe that we're going to be able to control the public through rules if they're going to be bringing things in. And moreover, speaking to Representative Jasper, this is a violation of the Second Amendment rights of the law-abiding citizens. The law-abiding citizens are not the ones that we're worried about. The criminal wants to come in. A criminal is going to come in and get a gun no matter what and carry it. It's the law-abiding citizens, which happen to also be our legislators, that this is going to affect. And further on that, we have in the Constitution the right of self-defense as a natural right. It's in our Constitution. I don't think we want to create another gun-free zone where violent crimes occur and are committed. Do we really want another defenseless zone created, and that being the State House of all places? And my last point, I'll be off my soapbox here.
Okay, as much time as you need.
I really think this is kind of a feel-good bill, and it can't be enforced. Since we're not going to be searching them, I don't understand what the purpose of this would do, other than make people be in violation of it if they feel they have the right to carry.
Thank you. Representative Richardson. I'm a Second Amendment guy. I have more guns than probably most people should have, and more varieties than anybody should have. And I'm also aware of a long term where the rules were in effect, but there were certain members who carried, and there are certain members of law enforcement who were legislators who carried. The problem was, I've been a firearms instructor since 1980, and I see a member standing in the audience who is proficient in firearms, who I think would probably agree with me that those who are proficient and even have been through classes, that if you were in the House chamber trying to shoot at the gallery, and you have dead-on sights, that the angle and degree of firing changes completely, and you can turn the gallery into a bloodbath and never affect the person that you're trying to get at, which would defeat the purpose to begin with, particularly if people carrying the chamber are carrying something like a 2-inch revolver, which seems to be what many carry over the years. I think just going back to the original language that's been in place for 50 years would start the process, and I have been a proponent for a long time of having the protective services be authorized to carry weapons, because I know that they've all been certified by police standards and training and have gone through all of that process, and that would be something that could be discussed in relatively short order and put in place in relatively short order.
Further comments, Representative Tucker.
Speaking to Representative Eaton's comments, I, as a representative, would feel more safe sitting in my seat if someone from the gallery were to, say, open fire on us, knowing full well that someone sitting next to me is armed, and not only is that person, probably a good dozen or so around the house is aiming back at them.
Further comments?
Well, I just got to say that gallery's full of fourth graders, and I just have to disagree with you. If you're thinking about somebody from the floor of the house shooting at somebody in the gallery, I think we got a good reason not to allow guns in the stadium.
Representative Tucker.
Thank you very much. It should be
Very
that
much a tennis match here.
I would feel that if the one person up in the gallery carrying a gun sees that there is 20 people on the house floor looking back at them through down the scope of their guns, it might dissuade them from shooting.
Representative Jasper.
I just want to speak to the fact that this is all about somebody shooting from the gallery, and the assumption is that someone would only shoot from the gallery or attack a member in the State House from the gallery. I think that's a false assumption, although I certainly share some of those concerns, but we hope that nothing like that would happen because of the fact that people would know this is not a place where you want to come in and try to take people out. But there's also people coming in the back door, people coming in the side doors, through the anteroom. There's not only one possibility of people attacking the house. So I would hope that we would not try to use the idea of people in the gallery or fourth graders as a reason, because I think that people who are proficient in firearms would recognize that, in fact, if they were to just randomly shoot back with those kind of potential innocent victims in the way, they would not do so. But again, I think we preclude this from happening when people know that this is not we are not just sitting ducks on the floor of the house.
Representative Chandler, then Representative Tucker.
No,
Representative Chandler.
It might be something that Representative Chandler had mentioned. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If we take this out and all members comply, what is our form of defense in the House should we have a situation such as that?
Representative Chandler. For
Comment,
comment, yes.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My mother taught me how to count, so I can count here, there's no question. But having said that, I get back to which I think are problematic, is the word adjacent and the word arrest. And is there any thought to trying to fix that either now or sometime? Because adjacent, I mean, as in addition to a couple things that Representative Jasper mentioned, adjacent are in areas that we don't control as part of the house on the second floor. They're not house-controlled areas always. And when you go, where does the Senate, when you leave the house down on the floor towards the Senate, where does the house stop and the Senate begin? I just think that's if we're going to arrest someone for something, we better be pretty clear where we're going to arrest them. And the other thing is the arrest thing is under what rule or law or what is that? Can anyone answer that?
Representative Richardson.
I'm going to say believe that the rest of the complex is under the control of the Joint Facilities Committee, so I would assume they may want to address this issue as well, and that may clear up the question or make the issue of Mr. Richardson unnecessary to deal with.
But, and that may happen, but it hasn't happened.
Representative Weber.
I just wanted to speak to the issue of arrest, because I've now managed to read all the way through the whole sentence, which I hadn't the first time I commented. But it says, and disciplinary action or arrest, or both, by action of the House. So the House has to do that. That's not just any old person, and that would be an action of the full House.
You want to respond?
And I understand that, I read that, but what are they being, or what is the charge? What's the penalty? What, the House arrests me, okay? What happens then? Where do I go to court? I don't know, I don't know what the remedy is for the arrest, that's all. I don't know. And I'm not making light of it because I think it's serious.
I think we've probably gone beyond the point where we're changing anybody's mind about anything, but I do believe the Constitution does talk about the powers of the House to govern its own procedures, and I believe arrest is referred to in the Constitution, so I don't think it's ever been exercised in our lifetimes, but
Representative Goldie.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just looking at a way to maybe clean up the language, and I'm looking at, I mean, you keep sticking upon any portion of the State House adjacent to any of the above. Why can't we take that part out and insert what we mean, the gallery?
Well, I think, just speaking to that, I think Representative Richardson raised a good point, that maybe that's something that should probably be addressed by the Joint Facilities Committee to set the boundaries, and I'm sure that the Senate President would be glad to, and I'm sure that at some point that could be taken up in Joint Facilities.
Last thing, I believe the House chamber includes the gallery.
The gallery does come into the House chamber, so that's. Any further comments? Representative Jasper.
I would like to offer an amendment, and I reckon it's not going to be about guns, because I recognize that would probably be futile. But after it says, right to stop and search any member on the House premise, on the premises of the House, to remove the period and then put back the word, or that any person is precluded a legally permitted exercise of self-defense or defense of others, period.
And that's your motion.
That is my amendment, to add those words back in.
Is there a second to Representative Jasper's motion? Representative Tucker. Seconds. Representative Jasper.
And just briefly, this doesn't have anything to do with guns. It is merely stating what should be always the case anywhere in the state of New Hampshire, that a person has the right to self-defense, and that a person is also permitted to come to the defense of someone who may be under attack. I can't imagine how anyone would object to that. Yes, we have security, but sometimes attack can very quickly turn into something that results in the death of another, and you don't have time to wait for someone else to come there. We need to be able to defend ourselves and each other.
Thank you.
Is there a motion? I'll second it.
I think Representative Tucker has already seconded. Is there any further comment on Representative Jasper's motion? All those in favor of the motion, please raise their right hand. Those opposed? Let the record reflect that the Representative Jasper's motion passed on a vote of 10-0. Is there a motion on this section as amended by Representative Jasper?
So moved, if it's all right.
Is there a second to adopting this section? Representative Weber seconds. Is there any comment before votes taken? Seeing none, those in favor of the adoption of this section as amended,
Why can't we comment?
please raise their right hand.
No. I'm sorry.
Representative Jasper, okay,
Yes, I voted for your motion.
and I appreciate that.
Those opposed? The motion carries on vote is 6-4. Representative Richardson.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The next change is on page 25, talking about sources of authority. And what this does is it reverses the order in which authorities control and reverts it back to what it was before 2010, so that custom, usage, and precedent come before Masons.
Any comments, Representative?
I would ask why.
Maybe the clerk could yield to that better than I can, but I think the feeling was that the custom that we've utilized here in New Hampshire should have a higher priority versus something that is contained in Merck Masons, which is sort of a general parliamentary, reference work. But maybe the clerk could.
Madam Clerk, you wish to add anything?
Yes, certainly,
Okay.
Mr. Chairman. Masons itself puts custom, usage, and precedent 2 steps above the adopted parliamentary authority. This was a discussion and a change that took place almost 20 years ago in this manual, when it was realized that it was written for legislatures, but it's a general manual, and every legislative body has its own customs, uses, and precedents. And at that time, the order of what they call rules of legislative procedure are derived from several sources and take precedence in the order listed below. Constitutional provisions, adopted rules, custom, usage, precedents, adopted parliamentary authority, and that's the order that the manual itself recommends. And when it changed last time in 2010, I couldn't get an answer as to why.
Representative Becker, that answer your question. Certainly.
But I don't want to talk.
Oh, no.
Okay.
Yes, exactly.
I think it should go back to the way it was before, that Masons should be ahead of custom, usage, and precedent. And I don't take much issue with custom and usage, because you're right, we do have certain customs that we do in the house and certain ways we do things being usage. But precedents, you start to run into a bit of an issue with precedents, because it can be a little more subjective than Masons. Masons actually has a very clear outline of what we should be doing, and it's not subjective to whichever past usage we want to use. And therefore, it also, precedents can become very arbitrary, that we pick and choose which past precedent that we might want to use to fit the current circumstance, whereas Masons would have it outlined how we should do it in the past. And a third issue I would have with putting precedent before this is also, sometimes it can be very difficult for us to find reference to the past precedents that we were looking at. So I really don't have an issue with custom usage, but I do have it for precedent.
Any further? Madam Clerk, do you want to respond?
I do not want to get into it either, but I would point out that any precedent that is stated from the chair is subject to appeal. So you never really have to worry about not knowing what the precedent might have been. And that's just the way it works.
For the Representative Becker.
Thank you. Well, what can happen though with precedents, when you start talking about past precedents, is maybe it was a bad decision by the chair. So I guess my question is there a list of precedents that we're going to use? Is there something available in terms of precedents? That we don't have anything like that, so it's just going to be basically by chance or someone's memory that we use a precedents to fill the certain circumstance that we want to happen here. So is there going to be a time frame for how back we can go in terms of looking at precedents here? I've just got some questions. If we're going to put that ahead of Masons, which again is objective versus precedents, which can be picked and choose, we've just got to be sure that precedents that we decide to choose wasn't overturned by future precedents. You see what I'm saying? Because it could be a lot of different precedents, and you can just pick and choose where Mason says, nope, that's how it goes.
Any further comments? Representative Jasper.
Well, I'm going to take my concerns in order here. The proposed rules that we were handed out on Tuesday had statutory provisions as B, which I think they should be. They are now the last, and I think that taking our own laws that we have passed and then putting them behind a parliamentary manual written by somebody else, even though we've adopted it in custom and usage and precedent, which is subjective, is wrong. If we have a law, we need to be following the law directly after the Constitution and even before our own rules. So I'm wondering if somebody could tell me why that changed between Tuesday and today.
I can tell you why it changed between Tuesday and today. It changed because I made a mistake when I was typing this. I had the original document and I just got it in the wrong order. But I
So this
discussed.
is wrong?
No, what you're looking at is correct.
Oh,
What
the original version you
earlier
received.
draft was my mistake. And I discussed it with the clerk, and she corrected me in the errors of my ways. But she may be able to better explain to you why she believes that statutory provisions should be last.
Madam Clerk?
I can tell you that it was a great debate approximately 18 years ago, 20 years ago, two volumes of Mason's, this one and the one prior. Before that, it was where you are talking about having statutory at the beginning, the blue volume that you have. And the great concern among members of the commission was that legislatures can't bind future legislatures, and that this is about procedure, and the Constitution says the legislature has the right to set its own procedure. So if the Constitution is going to be your rock bottom, you can't be bound by a statutory provision over your own rules or over whatever rules you adopt. And we adopt a parliamentary manual as part of our rules. I can tell you it was a nationwide discussion that went on for a couple of years. And the real reason, I can't even think of a statutory provision that deals with our rules.
You have satisfied my concerns. I totally understand your decision.
I thank you, Chairman.
If I may
Certainly.
continue.
Sure.
I was someone who was very concerned when we changed 2 years ago to put Masons before our custom and usage. I thought actually it worked much better to put that behind Masons, because precedent and custom and usage are so subjective to the memories of individual people. You're doing something on the fly and somebody remembers, well, we did this, 20 years ago, but they have forgotten a whole bunch of stuff that has gone on during the previous 10 years when certain things come up. And the thing that concerns me the most in this, and some of you may remember that I was very concerned and continue to be concerned about the stopping of the clock. We set all these deadlines for when committee of conferences, et cetera, have to be done. And we have seen things where the deadline was, say, 6 o'clock at night and the clock stopped. The Senate is very, very good at keeping us late, and we sometimes end up doing things that we later regret, because at 2 o'clock in the morning, people just want to go home. And I have seen, particularly in the last 2 years, we had those deadlines, the clock was not stopped, and the world did not end, because everyone knew the clock was not going to stop. And we got things done on time. And of all the things that we do, that's the one thing that bothers me the most, when the speaker can just say to a committee or conference, well, the clock is stopped. I think the House loses every time we do that. And this was the only protection that I saw from that happening. I think that was very effective. Beyond that, I can't think of any really where the custom usage and precedent has really been a problem. But I think it's a protection for the legislature when we vote in the deadline. We can't fall back on, oh, well, we stopped the clock. So I am opposed to it for that reason, primarily.
So what is it you want to do?
Madam Clerk, did you?
No, I was trying to remember what order he was saying he wanted to see this.
Did you want to respond to that?
Oh, just,
I couldn't hear him originally.
I'm sorry. You know, the way that it was before it was, yeah, trying to look. Masons, yeah, it was Masons and then the custom usage. It's just those two reversed that I support that. As I said, I was a skeptic when we adopted it 2 years ago, but I found that it worked very well for the members of the House.
Further comments?
Yeah, that's what she said, makes absolute sense.
Seeing no comments?
I remain unconvinced, that's all.
Okay. Seeing no further comments, is there a motion on the tentative adoption of this section? Second? Okay. Any comments before we go to statement? If you want, I could wait for the return of Representative Jasper.
If you would, please.
We're just going to, Madam Clerk.
Would someone please read for me, maybe Representative Richardson, the first, the order, because I'm working off an old copy. I gave away my
sorry.
new one to a member of the audience.
Yes, it is, A is constitutional provisions, B is rules of the New Hampshire House, C is custom usage and precedent, D is Masons, and E is statutory provisions.
Let me just pause and check. Okay.
We're waiting to see.
Oh, no,
Oh, that's right, no.
We need to get 1 minute on scintillating conversation.
Representative Chandler, just for your edification, we're on page 25. The motion is to adopt following section 64. And so, if there's any other comment, be glad to hear it. But otherwise, I'll ask for the vote. Okay, all those in favor of the tentative adoption, please raise their right hand. Those opposed? The record reflects the vote was 6-4 to adopt the motion. Representative Richardson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and you'll be pleased to know, I believe that the last change is on page 26, and this has to do with subpoena power. Essentially what it does is it returns to the prior rule that no subpoena shall issue except by majority vote of the entire House membership. You may recall this was an issue that came up during the past session, but I believe the change I propose to make back to is consistent with the Constitution, and so we've eliminated the reference to committee chairman and all. It was removed the provisions for a committee chair to request a subpoena and so forth, and leaves it in the hands of the House itself to decide whether a subpoena will be issued. If I may briefly just say that I think issuing a subpoena is an extremely unusual and rare event, and it's one in which reflects on the entire membership of the House. If we're issuing a subpoena, I really think that each member of the House should have an opportunity to express their view about that and to vote as to whether or not the subpoena should issue. And I think the power under the Constitution rests with the House, and that's where it should remain.
So, Representative Jasper.
I agree with the previous speaker, but I do have a a question. It does seem that the final sentence of the old, of the rule that is in existence now, stating that the speaker shall be authorized to take such action, et cetera, might be appropriate to leave in, since the rule as it's being proposed does not give any method for enforcing the rule. And unless there's a reason why it shouldn't be there, I would like to move to amend to place that sentence back into the rules.
Before you make that mistake, can I respond?
Okay. Well, that's why I didn't make it as a motion.
Thank you. First of all, I think it gives the speaker too much authority. You may recall that there was a proposal, I don't believe it was adopted, but there was a proposal that the speaker could impose a fine of up to $10,000 and I believe incarcerate somebody for up to 4 or 5 days. I don't think we as a House want to delegate that kind of authority, and as this is written, the language that you just mentioned, it just says the speaker shall take such action as may be necessary. That's, in my view, way too broad a delegation of authority. Again, I would think that it should be a matter for the House to decide if somebody violates a subpoena, what type of fine or what action is appropriate. So I'm really a strong believer in giving the House the authority to do things.
Thank you. I'm satisfied with that response.
Further comments? Seeing none, is there a motion regarding the tentative adoption of this second? Second. Representative Richardson. Any comments before the vote speaking? Seeing none, all those in favor of the adoption of the motion, please raise your right hand. Let the record reflect the motion passed on a vote of 10 to nothing. I'm sorry, I object, I'm sorry.
One nay.
Your hand is so petite, I must have
You
missed it.
didn't say nay.
I'm sorry, that's right. Boy, okay, all those opposed to the motion? One,
Oh, wait, make
okay.
sure I raise it nice and tall.
Okay, no, it wasn't your action, it was my eyesight.
Move to adjourn.
Before we do that,
Any other business become before the this committee? Representative
Chairman,
Tucker.
can I just ask one question here?
Certainly.
With the removal of petitions in Rule 4, can a member still make a motion to send a petition to a committee?
Since I don't practice law, I'm going to skip on that question. Madam Clerk, if you want to answer.
I was not going to even begin to answer that
Yeah.
question. I think everybody's a little leery-eyed. I know I am.
Yeah.
Right now, but
My concern is people have submitted these petitions
Mhm.
already. What is going to be the process? Can we affirm committees now that we don't have the committee that everyone thought they were going to have
Yeah.
happen? I mean, these people thought they were going to get a hearing, and now they're not.
Normally, I'd say we check with House Counsel, but that's not in place as of yet. Representative Richardson and Representative.
Well, I agree with the clerk's comment about being tired, and I certainly am, but I think that a member could still petition the Rules Committee for late entry or something, a petition or whatever.
we still have petitions.
We have, exactly, that's my point. We have petitions right now that have already been filed.
It's a waste right now.
Representative Weber and then Representative Jackson.
Well, another thing I was going to point out is that nothing precludes a particular committee from noticing that there is a problem, even in the absence of a bill. I know we have several committees that have standing subcommittees on particular issues. There's no reason that a particular committee cannot study a matter, even in the absence of a pending bill, or have a subcommittee study it with an eye to presenting legislation either to the Rules Committee if it's thought to be particularly urgent or in the next legislative session. That can always happen.
Representative Chandler.
Can we just get an answer between the Speaker's office and when we have a council and the clerk's office to represent the question of?
Oh, that was going to be my last comment, that I was going to find an answer for.
What is going to happen?
Before we meet again on.
Sure, because those petitions are out there, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
speaking out
No,
loud.
you asked a good question.
Right, and there's
And it wasn't my
people-
intent to not respond to it, but I'm hoping that sometime soon,
Sure.
from the Speaker's office, I can get an
Right,
answer.
because these people, I mean, these litigants need an answer.
If their petitions can be, could you?
What's going to happen to the petitions that at this point have already been submitted?
Okay.
Where are they going? Can a member still make a motion to send a petition to a particular committee.
Representative Jasper.
I did quite a bit of research on petitions before the redress committee was formed. And one of the things that I saw, which was really still consistent with what was going on, a petition of redress came in and a committee looked at the issue, and if they found a solution, they would formulate a bill for the next session anyhow. So nothing here precludes the member who is filing the petition to do so, and then take that information, perhaps work with an ad hoc group of members who agree and file a bill. Now, what I would hope would be that if a petition comes in, obviously that's not something that could be foreseen, and if that member, we would certainly as a rules committee have to look and see if there was time to adequately deal with it, or if it would need to wait. But if something came in, say, today, and someone came in with a late introduction based on a petition, I would hope that the committee would consider that bill for introduction based on that, which actually would be a much quicker way to deal with the grievance than is in place by sending it off to a committee to deal with it, because chances are there's still going to be people who are unsatisfied with the result of the hearing on the grievance and still want to file something if nothing was done, or they may find that bill was unsatisfactory. So there is nothing that prevents any legislator or group of legislators from looking at an issue, talking to the people, and filing a bill. And I certainly, as a member of the Rules Committee, will look favorably on late introductions based on a petition that comes in, leaving enough time for a reasonable amount of hearing for that legislative action to be taken.
I think that's partially answered Representative Tucker's question, if I'm not mistaken, and because you still have the concern about those who have already been filed, and what the status of those would be.
Yes.
And I'll try to get an answer as soon as I can for you. Any other business to come before Madam Clerk?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I would like permission from the committee to, when I publish these in the calendar, to make all necessary clerical corrections, headers, maybe numbering. Things might change a little bit based on what's been done here.
Lettering, numbers and all that, so moved.
Second.
Any comments before I call for the vote?
Oh, no, I just had another question. But
Okay.
after this-
All those in favor of that motion, please.
Aye.
I just
Motion carries
thank you
7
for
votes
letting-
to nothing. Representative Tucker.
We just have a table of contents. There isn't one. Are we going to get one back?
Oh.
What?
We have
Table of contents.
There,
Oh, there is a table of contents.
Oh, there will be. Okay. Thank you.
Any,
Mr. Chairman, before you, I know that you don't want us to speak, but I would like my objection to my inability to speak today noted in the minutes today, because I came up specifically for this hearing with prepared testimony and spent a great deal of time, and it was not clear to myself as a member or to a number of constituents who were here that they were not going to have an opportunity to speak.
for the record, my friend Litchfield's objection is noted for the record. Any other further business come before the committee?
Mr. Chairman, one
as
last
well?
question, I apologize.
No, right.
There was a good question that was asked earlier. Since you voted in this room, we're gonna vote on the House. Nobody answered the question, how you're gonna protect me coming from the garage to here or in other areas. Nobody answered Representative Tucker's question. It never came up on the protection of us.
That's noted as well. Any other business before coming before the committee from the members of the committee? Seeing none, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second? Yeah, I just want to thank everybody on both sides.